In the era of COVID, people have so many questions, doubts. The system seems to not be working, and we don't seem to be faring very well when it comes to handling this pandemic. Alongside all of that, we have people who outrightly deny there is a pandemic, famously dubbing it a plandemic. So I want to speak to someone about, what's going on in the world today, how we understand it, the conspiracies around it. And I couldn't find an expert, so I got my friend with me. Well, go on, Ridwan.
Well, go on.
What were you saying?
Good evening, wherever you guys are, and whatever time you're listening to it. I'm good. How are you?
I'm well. So I was just joking. Ridwan is probably one of the most smartest people I know and disciplined. He's got a background in pharmacy, and also you're doing a medical degree, isn't it? Yeah. And you done a master's in Islamic Studies.
A master's in Islamic Studies.
So many degrees. Like, where do we stop?
Like Pokemon, you gotta catch them all.
See that. This is why I brought him to Cultural Renaissance's podcast, The Malcolm Effect. You see what I mean? But yeah, let's go straight into it, man. What is the deal with COVID? I'm gonna throw everything out there: the queries, the questions, the doubts that I've seen. Because one thing, it's easy to dub something, people who have an alternative reading of events, as conspiracy. And I feel like it's sometimes, some of them are crazy and some of them like, okay, it's interesting. And I feel like it doesn't do it justice, or it's not, it's a disservice to kind of just fob it off as conspiracy. I feel like, we should engage in these conspiracies and answer them. So going straight into it.
It's quite a lot to unpack there. Going straight into it.
Is COVID real?
Is COVID real? Yes. Next question.
What do you mean by real? Like, okay. It's a real disease, yeah?
So COVID is the name for the disease, and sometimes it's used interchangeably with the virus itself. But in essence, it's the name of the disease caused by a new or novel coronavirus.
Okay.
So for those of you who done A-level biology, I think it is.
Let's start from GCSE biology.
GCSE biology. Okay. I don't think I remember that far back, so I'm not sure I can reflect that. So coronavirus is essentially a family of viruses. And so in taxonomy, all animals are classified by various categories. So at the top you have domain, then kingdom,
Okay.
Further down you have family, and so coronavirus is the name for a family of viruses. It's not just a single virus. The virus that is causing the current climate, its name is SARS-CoV-2.
Okay. So it's not the China virus, as President Trump says.
It's not Kung Flu.
It's not Kung Flu.
It's not any of these other
racist terms.
Yeah, exactly. It's not any of these sorts of crazy terms. It's very, it's a bit of a mouthful.
Okay.
And so a lot of people refer to that virus as COVID, but COVID refers to essentially the disease now. The virus itself is, we suspect that it came from an animal.
So first point.
Yeah.
People deny that viruses can jump from animal to humans.
Okay. We've seen many cases of viruses being able to do this. And the reason for that is we roughly share, the same genetic makeup to many other species. We have a lot of the same sort of features. In actual fact, if you look at just gross anatomy, most animals have, 4 limbs and a head and a torso and things like that. So it's not unusual for a virus to be able to use something in a different species. So it will randomly, spontaneously mutate and suddenly develop an ability to jump from one animal to the next.
Okay.
And we see it all the time. So it's not the first virus to do this. Even within our lifetimes, we saw bird flu, swine flu, etc., MERS, and the original SARS all jump across from animals to humans. So that's something that is
very well known.
Yeah, it's very well known, very well established, and we have an understanding of the process.
But then someone might say, looking at the death toll and looking at people draw this comparison saying, well, it's just like any other flu. And if it's just like any other flu, so I want to just add in addition to that question, if it's just like any other flu, why has the whole country gone into lockdown?
Yeah, that's a great question, and the simple answer is that it's not like any other flu. So it's a bit more of a complicated answer. So the flu itself is quite an established condition. So we have a lot of things developed in preparation for flu season. So we have a wide-ranging vaccination program. We don't have that with COVID. we know of the symptoms. We have some level of immunity
Okay.
because people experience flu year on year.
Yeah.
And we know how to manage the flu. So we have medications and treatment algorithms that help us manage patients with the flu itself.
Mm-hmm.
In the absence of all that, and flu is also still a quite a, well, not a deadly disease, but it does kill
Yeah,
people.
of course.
In the absence of all those circumstances, you still have a very quite a deadly disease. But COVID is still not like that. COVID is
Mm.
still, as we've seen, more fatal. And there's no statistics that you can draw a comparison to flu with, because
Okay.
we're dealing with a virus that emerged at the start of the year and has already killed more people than any flu cycle.
Okay.
So we're talking in a 6 month period or even a 3 month period, it managed to kill tenfold, whatever the number is, of people. So it's not the same.
It's
at
not
all.
just like any
It's
other
not
flu.
it's not like the same as the other flu. And we can also see that in how people are, well, how people develop the disease itself. So it is true, the older that you get, the more likely you are to die
The more
of,
lethal it is for
the more
you.
lethal it is. And
Yeah.
so I think if you're 80 years plus, it's roughly a 1 in 10 chance of dying.
Wow.
So that's quite a significant number. But we're talking about a 3% chance for, I think it's a 50 or 60 plus.
Okay.
Probably 60 plus, and then 1% for 50 plus, and then it goes down sequentially. But that's only one aspect of the question, because severity of disease and hospitalization is the other side of it.
Okay.
You don't want to fall sick and end up in hospital. And so
Yeah.
in the age ranges between 20 and about 40 or 44, we see roughly a 10 or 20% hospitalization rate, which means that there's a severe chance that you'll develop severe illness.
Wow.
Of which there's about a 1 to 4% chance of being in intensive care, so being put on a ventilator and all of these sorts of stuff. Obviously, those stats will improve with time as our
Yeah.
treatment and our management of this condition improves. So, taking a snapshot now is not fair to taking a snapshot at the
course.
start of lockdown. So
So
there's
so
those two
essentially then, since
aspects.
we don't know about this disease,
Yeah.
are we saying that the way the governments have handled it, I mean, we can go into that a bit
Yeah.
more, but is the reaction, has it been appropriate to the level, to the danger that this disease proposes?
Yeah, I mean, so it's a very difficult question to answer in all honesty, and the truth is we will never know up until all the consequences of what has happened has dissipated. And I'll draw a parallel to another event that happened within our lifetimes that was also attributed to many conspiracy theories, but let's take 9/11 for
Yeah.
example. Yes, 3,000 or so people died in the event itself.
Yeah.
But from examples of like pollution, inhalation, or the dust, people will die subsequently with cancers. And there are people who are alive today
Yeah.
that will die as a result of what happened on that day. And so we will never know exactly what the ultimate consequences of an action like a lockdown is up until we've assessed the economic implications.
Yeah.
How many people are dying within the healthcare system
Yeah.
during COVID, and we had time to assess all of these different parameters. We will never really know what the absolute right answer is. Having said that, we can make an assessment based on the data that we have
Yeah.
now. There's essentially two camps: lockdown and anti-lockdown.
Yeah.
Testing and anti-testing, tracing and anti-tracing,
Vaccination, anti-vaccine. So let's
Anti-vaccination.
talk about these camps, but
Yeah.
carry on.
So vaccination is something that is not yet developed, so we don't know about that yet. But
Yeah.
all the other measures that we've
Yeah.
already developed and taken part in, you can compare various countries' responses to it. Now, there's some truth that it's not always a fair comparison. There's so many variables
Yeah, of course.
when you're comparing a country to another country. So, but the country that is anti-lockdown, that's always prominently promoted and shown as evidence is Sweden.
Yeah, people say,
Famously,
sweet, but
yeah.
because they opted for the herd immunity.
Exactly. Well, they didn't really do that either. So they actually did encourage social distancing. They just never
Yes.
made it a full sort of legal
Yes.
scope. The main problem with comparing Sweden to the UK is that Sweden has a population roughly the same as the population of London.
Yeah, and it's so much. It's
5 times bigger
it's
than
massive.
England. Yeah, it's massive. So
Yeah.
automatically you have a climate in which the virus will find difficulty in spreading just based on population density alone. So a more fair comparison is countries that have either similar or greater
Yes.
population densities to the UK. And, we can look at Taiwan, South Korea, Germany.
Yeah.
All of these countries impose lockdown early, had a robust testing system, had a robust tracing system. Testing is basically, test and trace is the only thing that the WHO recommended, really.
Yeah.
They have a far better outcome than what we have
Yeah.
here and in Brazil and in the
Yeah.
US when compared to those countries. If you take a country with a lower population density, so a country like in New Zealand,
Yeah.
they weren't complacent in
Locking down.
yeah, they locked down early.
Exactly.
They developed testing. They developed their tracing systems.
Yeah.
And they were the first country to say that they were free of coronavirus
Yeah,
for
exactly.
a very brief
Exactly.
window. So in this short snapshot,
Yeah.
we can see that, lockdowns, they do help. Now, there was a recent sort of speculative study of what data exists at the moment. And what they found was the things that affect mortality
Yeah.
is preparedness,
Okay.
testing,
Yeah.
and essentially the population's characteristics. So
Okay.
are they old?
Yeah.
Are they obese? Do they have other pre-existing conditions? Those are determinants of mortality. Where did lockdown fit into this? Well, it was shown that lockdown improved recovery rates to the disease itself, and it's hypothesized basically that by locking down you don't surge past hospital capacity. Ergo, you're a bit better prepared because you have a bit more capacity, therefore you can save more lives. So whilst lockdown hasn't been directly attributable to reducing mortality, it has been linked to increasing recovery for 6 patients.
Okay.
So it's a bit of a
No,
mouthful.
thanks for that. But like, in speaking on lockdown itself, how do you rate this government's response to the virus?
No comment. No comment.
No comment.
No comment. I think. Look. So in quote unquote debunking conspiracies, and like you said, there's a balance. I think it's important to maintain a degree of skepticism and be open to the idea of criticisms and being able to challenge ideas.
Yeah.
Skepticism can be a force for good.
Yes, of course.
It has, in the past uncovered mistakes or crimes even by governments, Watergate being a famous example. Companies and pharmaceutical companies even, so the case of thalidomide, where a drug was given as a anti-morning sickness drug and it caused a great deal of birth defects. The company itself tried to suppress this information to maintain its profits, and these sorts of things are appropriate. And so in doing so, we can be critical of what government policies exist. And so in that respect, I think the UK government could have handled this pandemic better. There's the big question of, did we go into lockdown early enough? Again, it's a very emerging thing. We don't know how that would have really played out.
But do you understand do you get, and I feel like I understand the sentiments completely, why people don't trust the government? Because we had, for example, Dominic Cummings flouting the rules of lockdown for his own personal, and this is someone who's seen, quote unquote, in the deep society. He's in the cogs of the government anyway. And then we have then now with the Brexit thing, government's looking to break the international law. People are saying, well, what's the point then? If you lot, it's not clearly not as deep to you lot as it is. So do you feel like the skepticism is justifiable when it comes to COVID, or it's not?
So I think there's two different questions here. Is that, well, firstly, what is a conspiracy theory?
Okay.
What classifies as a conspiracy theory?
How do you define it?
So the definition, per quote unquote, my definition for it is that it is essentially a belief that a subversive or covert group, organization, government, person, but they are a person of influence or power or authority, are responsible for a unexplained or insufficiently explained event. So to be categorized as just conspiracy, it has to have that kind of theme where there's this evil entity and they are responsible for it. And so what I would classify, and early on in the pandemic we saw 5G, for example. That's a good classical example, because 5G, there's telecommunication companies, the government wants control, there's all this subversion. And why? Because they're doing it why does this pandemic happen, this insufficiently unexplained event? Is because of the 5G. So
but then we know, again, when you see 5G across the world, places that have had 5G longer than the UK haven't had the level of COVID patients that we've had. So clearly that's been debunked.
And a more substantial case is the case of Iran, which doesn't have any 5G whatsoever,
Exactly.
and they still have COVID.
Yeah.
So it has been largely debunked, but that is the general theme of a conspiracy. Now there is degrees to it.
Of course.
So, for example, another conspiracy is that the virus was manufactured.
Yes.
That is a bit harder to absolutely disprove.
But you mean to tell me, bro,
Yeah.
it's just a coincidence
Yeah.
that where they have the only biomedical testing lab in China
Yeah.
is in Wuhan.
Yeah.
And Wuhan is where the virus comes from. You don't tell me that these people, if it's going to be people in China, wherever it is, have known. We see the videos on YouTube and Instagram that they eat a lot of funky, what we will call funky food.
Okay.
Yeah, so they eat like bats and all these things. So they've been eating bats for so long, and just now they've got COVID from it, or this because that's the belief, isn't it?
Yeah.
That somehow this bat had COVID and it transferred over to a human being, and and then that was a patient zero in Wuhan and spread it out. But at the same time, we have a whole biomedical testing lab in Wuhan. So I understand. I understand a lot of the time when I talk to people who. I don't actually like the way conspiracy theories is used derogatory. I don't actually like it. I feel like conspiracy theory does actually, it forces you to engage in a topic that in a way you might not have done it before, and to just kind of strengthen your belief on something. So, for example, like but a lot of time with conspiracies, I know that they like to connect the dots somewhere. It might not even be anything. It could just be a coincidence sometimes.
Yeah.
But they like to connect these dots somewhere. But yeah, so in my initial question is, are you really telling me it's just a coincidence that the testing lab is in Wuhan and that's where it started?
Okay, but then let's look at let's zoom out a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, let's look at other coronavirus cases. MERS.
Yeah.
It was not near any testing labs. It emerged in the Arab Peninsula somewhere.
Yeah.
SARS, again, it emerged in China, but not near a testing lab.
Yeah.
And bird flu, swine flu.
Yeah.
They came about based on this. So you can argue that it's not a coincidence because it just happened there.
Yeah.
But there's a more appropriate link in wet markets, for example, the unregulated, or at least less regulated trade of animals, often exotic animals that don't interact with humans, where they're traded and they get the opportunity then to interact with humans.
Okay.
So it's either you can if you want to opt for that statement of it's there's a biolab and you have to ignore all the other evidences.
Okay.
There's obviously, like I'm saying this, and this is this is where it comes into that idea of not being able to absolutely disprove it. There's no way I can absolutely disprove it without investigating the lab and looking at it
see
top
who
to
came
bottom
in and out.
see came in and out and There's no way of doing it, but you need a strong reason to believe that was the cause, if that's what you're going to say the cause is. And there's not a strong enough reason. So we know that other cases of viruses transmitted in wet markets rather than in a lab. It shares about 70 to 80% the same DNA as a virus. That's often cited as the original SARS virus.
Okay.
That's often cited as a reason to prove it's manufactured, but that's also consistent with evolution. We share 96% or whatever the statistic is of our DNA with the chimpanzee, but a chimpanzee never manufactured us and we never manufactured the chimpanzee. These are two independently developed viruses. We know that viruses jump from animals to humans.
Okay.
So there have been, from what I understand, experts who have studied the virus and came to the conclusion that there's nothing peculiar about this virus. Its DNA sequence is
in
fine.
very layman terms. So to cut you off, very layman terms, how is the virus transmitted?
How is the virus transmitted? So this particular virus, there's many ways of viruses being transmitted.
Yeah.
This particular virus has two transmission routes.
Okay.
Number one is respiratory aerosol, which means that it's essentially breathed or coughed out, and usually in a little droplet or something that kind of sustains it, and then it's breathed in by the other person. There's also growing evidence that it follows the oral-fecal route, so meaning that people eat it, put it out, infect something else.
Okay.
So there's those two modes of transmission. So equally, it could be someone coughing and then someone else eating from the plate, or using the same cutlery. So that's how the virus is transmitted.
Okay, cool. Has there been any of the conspiracy theories that you surrounding COVID that have sparked your interest or at all, or you've even entertained any of?
That's a good question. So it's a difficult question to answer, and I think if we look at the psychology of conspiracy theories, we're all probably guilty of something along the line.
Mm-hmm.
So the way conspiracy theories come about, it's not really it's not absolutely explained, and I don't think there's anything that about human behavior that's absolutely explained. There's portions that we can explain, but there's certain things that we can't, and so conspiracy theories fall into that category. Now, one major part of conspiracy theories is the biology of humans. So one of the things that makes us uniquely human compared to any other animal, so it's not necessarily our intellect or our strength or any of these things, it's generally speaking, one of the defining characteristics is our ability to tell stories.
Yes.
And our ability to share ideas, share narratives. It forms our own identity. Narratives about ourselves form our own identity. Now, that has great evolutionary advantages.
Yes.
So we can unite, nations. For example, a nation is an idea. It's not anything that's defined by the laws of
imagined
nature.
reality, isn't
exactly. It? And so we can unite people based on nations, religions, ideas, things of that nature. So it united a great deal of people, but it was also a protective mechanism.
Yeah.
So there's a hypothesis known as adaptive conspiracism hypothesis.
Okay.
And what this says is that our ancestors, early hunter-gatherers, they had a huge problem with intergroup conflict.
Okay.
And that led to a substantial loss of life and infighting and things like that. And so we developed this adaptive behavior of being able to figure out who the conspirator is. So when they're forming coalitions, we can then single them out and develop our conspiracy, in this case, it's actually a conspiracy.
Yeah.
But we can, figure out who that person is.
Yeah.
So that's one of the theories that emanate about it. And that's something that to some degree we're all kind of guilty of.
Yeah.
And when we spoke the other day, I gave the example of when a friend does something that we perceive to be a slight towards us.
Yeah.
We often come to the conclusion they hate us.
Yeah.
They are plotting against us.
Yes.
They are doing this, they are doing that.
Yes.
When in actual fact, they could just be forgetful. And when we really reflect, how often do we actually think about our friends? It's rare to think about many people every single day of your life and
speak
put
for
them
yourself. Because you're a bit of an introvert.
I don't like people, guys. I don't like people. No,
This is what I'm saying.
But yeah, so it's easier to come to that conclusion, and that falls into it. There's another biological phenomenon that is known as illusory pattern perceptions.
Yeah.
And essentially,
which means
essentially it's seeing things out of randomness or trying to formulate an idea out of nothingness. And again, this is a very adaptive thing. So if you eat something and you fall sick, you probably remember, that smelled a bit off.
Yeah.
I shouldn't eat stuff like that. Now, the smell could be completely irrelevant, but you do that to protect yourself. Equally, if you see, say, a river and there's, an abundance of growth near the river itself, you may associate rivers with the growth.
Yes.
And so you will, more likely
what do you call it? Illusory?
Pattern perception.
Okay.
Illusory pattern perception. Let me just quickly look that up.
before my viewers think,
illusory pattern perception. Yeah.
Cool.
And so that's it's a very adaptive behavior. Now, to just kind of demonstrate how good our brain is at making things up, I have a bit of an experiment. So hopefully I can explain this to the listeners at home, but you can be a witness to this. Have you ever seen your own blind spot?
Huh?
Yeah. So each eye has a blind spot, and I'm gonna try and highlight that to you now.
Okay.
Just to demonstrate how good the brain is at making things up.
Okay.
So just pick an object in the distance on the other side of the room that you can look at.
Okay, cool. If anyone's at home, I'm looking at a vase.
A vase. Okay. Now take your left hand and cover your left eye.
Yep.
Okay. Now this next bit is really important. You can't move your head.
Okay.
Or change. Is the top of the vase at eye level for you?
Yeah, about eye level.
So everyone at home, look at something in the distance that's about eye level, and cover one eye.
Okay.
Now
we're talking about the big vase, yeah?
The big vase.
Okay, cool.
Keep absolutely still. You can blink, but don't move your eye and don't tilt your head.
Okay.
Okay. Now the thing that you're focusing on, take your right hand and just put the tip of your thumb over the top of it. Okay. Full extension. So if you put your arm out completely straight, so is the tip of it now covered by your thumb?
Yeah. Okay. So the Arabic writing, yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. Now all I want you to do is this.
Yeah.
Again, not moving your eye, not moving your head.
Mm-hmm.
Just slowly, absolutely slowly, because the window is about the size of your thumb.
Okay.
So slowly move it outwardly. So you're moving your right hand towards the right.
Mm-hmm.
and just keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. Eventually, what will happen is, so you're not moving your eyes, right?
No.
Yeah, that's really good. Keep going. Eventually, when you get just past about, it's usually about just past shoulder width.
Yeah.
The top of your thumb actually should disappear.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, what do you see at the moment? Has it actually disappeared?
I can't see it.
You can't see it. Is it out of your field of view, or is it in?
No. It's
still there.
It's inside, yeah.
Okay. Now just do this. Wiggle your thumb up and down. What do you see?
Movement.
Do you see the thumb?
No.
No. But what do you see in its place where the thumb should be?
Where the thumb should be.
Yeah, where the thumb should be. Where you're not seeing your thumb. What do you see instead?
I just see movement though.
Do you see the actual thumb?
No.
No. So what is it that's replacing it? It's not a black spot. It's usually filled by the background itself, right?
Yeah.
So you can see like probably the TV in this room.
Yeah.
And so that's, even though that is where your thumb is what you should be seeing.
Yeah.
Your brain has completely made up an image of what that spot should be. And even more frequently, if you wiggle your thumb out like this, your thumb should come back into view and go back out into view.
Yeah.
And so like you can see it disappearing
and
reappearing.
Yeah.
Now, you're not seeing just a blank spot.
Yeah.
You're probably seeing the TV there, right?
Yeah.
You can see the TV. But that's a blind spot. Why can't you register the thumb? So your brain is just completely making this scenario up. And that's what the brain does. Sorry, I just caused you to fog up your glasses.
It's all right, it's all right.
For the listeners at home, the eye that was covered is now all steamed up. So that causes us to... That's how great the mind is at making things up.
Okay.
Now, the illusory pattern behavior falls into conspiracies very well.
Okay.
So another famous conspiracy, Pizzagate.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, Pizzagate. So for anyone who is not familiar with Pizzagate, it was started off by a right-wing political group in the United States called QAnon, and essentially, in very broad terms, I'm sure there's layers to this conspiracy, is that the Democratic Party is this child trafficking ring that not only abuses children but cannibalizes them, and there's multiple layers, and Jeffrey Epstein and the Clintons.
Before you carry on, science wise, is there any truth to eating kids keeps you young?
No, absolutely.
Are you sure?
I'm sure.
Okay,
I'm sure,
okay.
No. But so what happens? So in this conspiracy, the reason why it's called Pizzagate is that in one of the leaked emails, there's a reference to a pizza that is, the weirdest language in the world. It says like, "Can I have a pizza for an hour?" And that is used as a code word for children. So I want you to see how they develop their argument is they present the stats of missing children first.
Yes.
Then say that the Democrats are kidnapping these children, that these children are being trafficked, even though there's multiple reasons why children go missing or are reported missing. Some are found again. We do know people do kidnap. Some people go, run away, and there's many reasons why a child can go missing. But there's an attribution of the statistic of children going missing to the story.
Yeah.
So then you have this now pattern perception kicking in, slowly kicking up a gear. They find the typo. The typo must be in reference to the children. We made up a pattern. It could have just been a typo.
Yeah.
There could have been 1,001 explanations for that reason. It could be a code word for something else. You're on the precipice of discovering this new thing. But you make a pattern based on these limited amounts of data.
Yeah.
So your brain does that.
So your brain fills in the gaps.
Your brain fills in the gaps.
Yeah.
And so that's where conspiracies come into that aspect of our biology. Now, it goes even further than that. So we're going to go deeper into the rabbit hole.
It's the first time I've ever heard the science behind conspiracies from a biological perspective. It's fascinating.
It's multifaceted as well. So that this is just
of course, it's an intro.
Yeah. Intro to a much deeper conversation that I'm not at all an expert in. I'm just making this up on the fly, guys. Google was my friend.
No. Carry on.
We try and make sense of randomness.
Mm-hmm.
It's great. It's a great thing. These sorts of behaviors, they fall into that idea of trying to make sense of random events. Now, the things that we perceive as random, if it's random, then there's no sense to it whatsoever. Random is random. You can't be more or less random.
Yes.
It's random.
Yes.
Fine. But we don't perceive it that way. In things that we can encode quicker using these sorts of pathways, we tend to perceive them as less random. So events, usually, even though they're usually not linked, they can be encoded a lot more quickly in our heads.
Okay.
And we can develop a story around these a lot quicker than, say, a sequence of numbers. Even though we do, again, completely unrelated, random point. A similar process probably happens when we read out our phone numbers.
Yes.
Our phone numbers, even though it's generally speaking, barring the first 2 digits or so, is a random sequence of numbers. We always read it out in a weird sequence, right?
Yes.
Like everyone follows the same pattern because
Yeah.
we've attributed some sort of meaning to
Yes,
this random
yes.
sequence of numbers. For anyone who's curious, my one is a 3-3-2-3 formation. So I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So when I read out my number, I read it out in that sequence. You know, a lot of people offer the 5-3-3 formation, so they'll read out the numbers as 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So in terms of
I'm
digits,
thinking of mine. Mine is, well, my Egyptian number. I do 3, 4, 3.
3, 4, 3, exactly.
Yeah.
So we
3, 4, 3.
attributed this random coding to this random sequence of numbers just because we kind of could, and
Because
it made it easy.
it made it convenient.
It made it convenient, and we did all of these things. The big next question is, why do we do all of this sort of stuff? And so this is where we now transition from the biology into the psychology of it all.
Yeah.
We hate uncertainty.
Yes, of course.
We hate it. We absolutely, worst thing in the world. And, you know, I'm sure as many people have experienced when they've sat an exam, for example, and you may come out of an exam being the most confident person in the world.
Yeah.
And someone asks you in the hallway, what did you get for that final answer?
Yeah.
And you're like, elephant. And they're like, it's a maths test. How are you getting elephant?
You remind me of that meme. The meme was like you come out of the exam hall, and everyone's put 42 as an answer, but you put goat.
Goat, yeah, exactly that. And so suddenly a smidgen of uncertainty has entered you, and that smidgen will keep you up until you finally get the results
back. Yeah.
And so, and in a aim to sort of combat that, we try to come up with an explanation for what we're seeing, to explain away that uncertainty.
Yeah.
Simple solutions are adopted quicker than complex ones. And so we won't take time to fully understand what is happening. We will just provide a simple explanation.
Yeah.
The other benefit of having a simpler explanation is that it's predictable.
Yeah.
And so going back to our earlier analogy of the friend who slighted us, we come to a simple explanation. There's a period of uncertainty. Why did they do this?
Yeah.
Then we say they hate us.
Yeah.
We came to a simple explanation for that behavior.
Yeah.
Why? Because it's so predictable.
Yes.
They hate us. They will behave like this the next time.
It
It gives us a sense of control.
Yes.
And that's something that we will desire, a sense of control in this sea of randomness that is, you know, life and fate and all of those other.
But okay, cool. That is all beautiful, and you know me, I share the similar views with you. But I think I want to act as a proxy.
Yeah, sure.
Are you not just an NHS stooge?
Am I not just? I am a government shill.
Government
I'm on their payroll.
On the payroll.
I'm on
Because end
the
of the
payroll.
day, history tells me a lot of stuff.
Mm.
And history. The thing about history is that it allows us to analyze the behavioral patterns of institutes, behavioral patterns of people, and behavioral patterns of organizations. So, for example, we know the famous one, Tuskegee experiment, when there was a deliberate government-led program which is infecting particularly black men of a certain age with syphilis to see how the virus works in their body. That was uncovered. That was spoken about. We know COINTELPRO was when the CIA under J. Edgar Hoover would deliberately infiltrate black movements with snitches and bring them down and set them up. For example, in many cases, I believe Fred Hampton, and how he was the leader of Black Panther movement. That's how he was set up. How he was killed, and there's many incidents like this.
Yeah.
It might not be Fred Hampton, don't quote me on that. But someone big in the Black Panther movement was assassinated by snitched. All these things, yeah. So it's so nice you tell yours. I can equally say that everything you told me right now is a conspiracy. Because it makes sense to me. It's like, okay, it made sense, cool. I'm with it. It's what you said to me is very logical.
Yeah,
100%. I can get on board with it.
Yeah.
But then knowing what I know about, for example, the nature of, especially when it comes to big pharma in America.
Yeah.
We know there's been direct sterilization programs.
Sure. Yeah.
Of certain demographics. Yeah. We know Tuskegee experiment. We know, like, the record of the pharmaceutical company when in this capitalist society when it's just money.
Yeah.
It does make sense they're going to put out a vaccine.
I mean, well, okay. So again,
why should I believe you?
Yeah, that's a good question. Why should you believe me? There's no easy answer to that question. Let's try and break it down. we're not arguing here for the case of people are incapable of evil.
Yes.
That's
very well documented.
Yeah, well documented. We know that people are capable of evil. Having a healthy level of skepticism is good.
Yes.
What happens with conspiracy theories is that, and the reason why conspiracy theories can be damaging is that belief is sometimes inappropriately transitioned into action.
Yes, so we saw the 5G towers being burnt down.
5G towers
we saw
being
people
burnt down.
no longer getting kids vaccinated, for example.
Exactly those sorts of examples, or inactivity on global warming and all of these things.
Yeah.
And it's those things that can be harmful. Now, one of the other things that does happen is that people begin to lose a sense of agency and the ability to change things.
Yes.
If you think of, let's just say it's the pandemic is fake for a second, and you think every government around the globe is in on it, and every media organization is in on it, every university, every scientist, every doctor is in on it.
Yeah.
Who is left for you? Who do you think, like, what can you do now to change the world around you?
Yeah.
You're disempowered in comparison to the opposite, this idea. And this is the problem with giving, like this narrative of this subversive but almost all-powerful agency that is influencing these sort of decisions and the events that are insufficiently explained, is that you remove agency from yourself by doing it.
Yes.
Like you're not powerful enough to take on that big of an entity, because how can you, we're talking about not only millions of people, and then you're saying that the state of all of these peoples is that not a single one of them had a conscience to
but then okay, we're hitting back on that then. Let's say, I don't know how it works in the medical profession. Is it that we go with the majority? No. So for example, in the recent documentary that was produced by London Real called Plandemic, which I finished, and
documentary is very generous. Documentary is very generous. But continue.
In that documented
in that video
by London Real by Brian Rose, he says he doesn't always agree, but he says he supports people's right to say what they want to say.
Yeah.
So did you watch it?
No, okay. And I don't intend to. If for anyone who's interested, there's thousands of debunking videos that goes through fact by fact of everything within the pandemic. Be interested in watching those, but continue.
So I watched Plandemic, and I did watch some people debunking it.
Yeah.
So you just said that we don't always need to go with the majority when it comes down to the medical world, yeah?
Yeah.
You can expand on that further. Yeah. But let's say in Plandemic, we have one doctor, two doctors to be fair. It didn't really fare well, if I'm honest with you. You know why? Because Dr. Rashid Buttar, how we say his name is, has been struck off or been warned several times over like unorthodox practices on to do with, I think it's with autism maybe.
Yeah.
That's for example. Then we had another person speaking about the pandemic when he had like a doctor, and then we found out he's actually a chiropractor. Chiropractor.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, okay, that's not. But there was one doctor.
Yeah.
I forgot her name.
By the way, herself has been also discredited for being an anti-vaxxer, in fact.
Yes.
So yeah, but yeah.
But then you're saying we don't go with the majority. So can one doctor not have a standing opinion that means anything?
What I mean by the majority isn't a person's opinion. It's not a democratic process.
Okay.
We test things.
Yes.
So, for example, you can have the opinion that gravity doesn't exist.
Yes.
But I will test it. Gravity exists. That was the sound of my phone falling.
He dropped his phone on the floor. That's how you know he's a doctor.
That's
how you know he's a doctor.
It's not even. Even I had a sense of panic. I was like, "Damn, why did I do that?" I just picked up the closest object to me. So
glad it wasn't my phone.
Yeah, we have to test. Yeah, exactly. It could have been a mic or a laptop. It's just whatever was conveniently close to me. But we test our hypothesis.
But the Earth is flat though.
Huh?
The Earth is flat though.
The Earth is flat, exactly. But like, do you see in this spectrum where we can produce overwhelming data,
yes.
If you have an opinion on it, prove it to us.
Good.
Bring your evidence. It's not based on opinion. That's the beauty, I guess, of the scientific method. Now, science in many people's perceptions is this evil organization, and it's
you think that's from the remnants of like post Judeo-Christian societies?
I think there's multiple facets to it. I think that does play a role. The Christian narrative even does play a role, even today, and we see in media the mad scientist trope, who's often quite stoic in nature, doesn't care about emotion, doesn't follow his heart, and then he has this evil plan to, even though like maybe the cause is something that is noble, his pursuits of it is this unhumane and uninterested aspect, and it's this rotation, and the hero is always someone who's, I followed my heart.
Yes.
I followed my love.
Yeah.
I followed my. So we feed into this trope. The scientific method is not that.
Okay.
The scientific method is just a means through which it's a path towards an objective shared reality. Okay. And what I mean by that is it's not always going to necessarily lead us directly to that objective shared reality.
Yeah.
But it's a path towards it. So we understand a bit more the further we go down this path.
Yeah.
Its basic premise is this. You have a hypothesis. You have an idea. You develop a test to prove that idea.
Yeah.
You share your results. Everyone else, if they don't believe what they've seen, they come up with a different test to disprove you.
Okay.
And you keep doing that. And if every test that you present to it gets proven, your hypothesis gets proven over and over and over and over again, then at a certain point we accept it as this is our objective shared reality, our fact. So gravity is the good example.
Yeah.
We, nobody will deny gravity. Everyone has experienced gravity. We've tested gravity. We've tested the limits of gravity.
Yes.
And so that is how science informs. It's not a majority.
Yes.
It's not an opinion piece.
Okay.
It's based testing data. Now, we can talk about various biases that may be introduced to that testing data, but there's procedures to minimize that biases. You spoke about pharmaceutical companies. Of course, a pharmaceutical company would be interested in
money.
Yeah, in money. It's a for-profit business. We live in a capitalist society. So in their interest, they may introduce a bias that, looks favorably upon data that they present about a drug or anything like this. They may even subvert information about potential negative effects of a drug. That does not necessarily mean that that is an explanation for phenomenons that we observe, but that's not a flaw in the process.
Okay.
So, for example, if now you studied it, and majority, this is the interesting about science, is that it's disproven by other science.
Yeah.
It's not disproven by opinion. It's when things change, it's changing because someone has tested it and been like, no, that's not true.
Yeah.
Early on, for example, we had the wonder drug chloroquine, which was, Trump's touted as the cure. We have it, and people tried to buy it and stock up on it, and they wanted it as a preventative. It was research published in the British Medical Journal, in fact, that tested that hypothesis and found it to be not true. If it was absolutely unbiased and absolutely for profit, that same data set proved a very cheap drug was effective at treating coronavirus. A steroid drug that is it reduced mortality by about 30%. Huge step. Yeah. Why would you pick that drug? Yeah. You should pick an expensive drug. Exactly. Pick something that's, £300, £400 and patent that and do this. Why would you discover a penny, a tablet that's manufactured for a couple of pennies and be like, that works?
I think what you said though was really, 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 it's stuck in my mind when you said that you want me to, when it comes to specifically COVID, people want us to sign up to the idea or accept the idea that millions of people, or at least hundreds of thousands of people in governments and scientists and whatever sector it may be, that not one of them has a conscience. And I think that's very... But at the same time, hitting back then, obviously the Tuskegee experiment wasn't...
For example, that experiment was done by that was done by a substantial number of people in a climate of racism. However, when it was published, it was discredited from the start. Yeah. It was robustly refuted for being absolutely unethical, unscientific. Yeah. The data was useless. Okay. So we see the response elsewhere. Everything that you describe has come out in one way, shape, or form due to a whistleblower.
But do you not feel like they don't help themselves? When in 2020 now, we've heard the French scientists say we have to test in Africa. Yeah. We've heard people say it, and again, I knew what Matt Hancock? I don't know who it was, who said that the virus will only work if test it on black people. Yeah, like the language is like, can you imagine? Think about it. Yeah, we already know there's institutionalized racism, institutionalized bias. We already know you know as well as I do that many doctors were found to have an implicit bias where they believe black people had a higher pain threshold. Yeah, absolutely. We already know that black women, as a direct result of that, are 3 times likely to die in childbirth, or more time likely than their white counterpart. We know all this stuff. So as someone, a person of color, me specifically, why should I trust these people? I'm like, nah, man, you lot clearly. And then I wanted to touch on as well a bit about depopulation. We'll get onto that. Yeah, okay, but then why should I trust you, man?
So again, like for example, the testing in Africa, where we said, where this pharmaceutical company said that,
Two scientists.
yeah, they said that, but who called it out?
The who?
Exactly, not just anyone in the WHO.
The
Head of the
then
WHO, who
director.
was a person of color.
Yeah.
Do you understand? Like, so yeah, you can say, okay, if you're not going to trust, say, Matt Hancock, who's not an expert on any of these things,
Yeah.
at least trust someone like the leader of the WHO,
Yeah.
for example, or international collaboration. Have you I guess this way it comes into the question of both critical thinking and scientific literacy.
Yeah.
Because what you've described in terms of racism, and people giving treatment that is absolutely atrocious in this day and age to a person based on their skin color, those are real life phenomenons.
Yeah.
That doesn't stop you from protecting yourself in other ways.
Okay.
Just by writing off all the information, you're still, like I said, you're giving away your agency.
Yeah.
But you're also failing to, well, it's shown that people who believe in conspiracy theories will not follow best practices, which means you're more prone to the virus, which means that you're going to get, you're going to face harm, or, for older people, they may face death.
Yes.
These are still problems. It never erased the virus.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Yeah. That virus is there.
Yeah.
And you still have to protect yourself against the virus. Yeah, be skeptical about trusting someone when it comes to your kid. That's fine. I understand that, and I understand where it comes from. But at the same time, don't, as they say, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yes.
It's the same sort of
phenomenon. So what we're talking about, again, what you've mentioned a few times in private on this, it's that level of healthy skepticism versus unhealthy skepticism, and maybe the lines are a bit hard to draw.
Yeah,
it's arbitrary. It's arbitrary, but I fully understand that.
Yeah, I think in the absence of evidence, it's very difficult to justify. And so, like, just going back to conspiracy theories, and especially when it comes to the coronavirus, the thing that you described actually falls into another aspect of conspiracy theory and which ones we choose to believe. Yeah. So we've spoken about, the biological aspects of it, how we come to develop these ideas. We look for simpler explanations for things that are unexplained, or, the explanation isn't sufficient enough. Yeah. We also, the part about powerful agents, usually when something powerful happens, we're talking 9/11, we're talking the Holocaust, we're talking, even the pandemic now, we want a causative agent that is equally as powerful to that. So we suddenly create this sort of, like a commensurate sort of narrative agency that effect and cause is the same. But the ones that you choose to believe is a different question, and that is driven by our real world experiences. So exactly what you described. You may be more willing to adopt a coronavirus conspiracy or a healthcare conspiracy if your, experiences with healthcare have always been bad.
Yes.
Or, for example, if you're heavily politically influenced, or a political extremist, which is an indicator for, actually, it's something that is a good indicator for who will be susceptible to conspiracy theories and who's not. But if you're, for example, if you're extremely right wing, then you are more likely to believe conspiracies against the extremely left wing. Or say if you don't want to change your, if you're invested in oil, then you will probably adopt a conspiracy theory based around global warming. Okay. Or if you don't, or can't, should I say, adopt the best practices of COVID, then you may develop to avoid a sort of cognitive dissonance, you may adopt a opinion that is conspiratorial. So earlier you asked me, do I believe in any conspiracies? There was once a time where, middle of the pandemic, so I'm now isolating and all the rest of it, best practices, etc., where I came to the realization that I need to work. Okay. I need to work. And in my head, I started to downplay the severity of the virus. Okay. If anyone else asked me, I would tell them straight away, the virus is severe, do this. But in my own head, I tried to justify my reasoning to myself that the virus isn't as bad for me as it is for everyone else. Okay. And I recognized that that's what I was doing, and then so I was able to challenge it. And so, for example, when we look at minorities within the UK, generally speaking, they are from a lower socioeconomic backgrounds. They will probably be more likely to have an occupation that requires them to go out. People before the pandemic were working 2 or 3 jobs, to make ends meet and to survive. They will naturally come to a conclusion whereby they try to mitigate the danger that's out there. Yes. And so they will be more likely to adopt a conspiracy.
Yes.
Where it becomes harmful is just that
Yeah.
they have adopted something that hasn't changed the circumstances out there. Yeah, there may be multiple factors at play. The media is at play. The media was blaming, as I think there was one article that I read that he said, a Pakistani migrant did this with the coronavirus and da da da. And so like all of these factors still are at play, but that hasn't changed the fact that there's also a virus out there and you're susceptible to the virus and you're still in danger to the virus. And just because we're forced into this position of trying to come to terms with our reality and what we need to do, we may adopt that conspiracy thinking in that circumstance. So I guess there's a level of critical thought and a level of, I guess, honesty to ourselves that we should bring forth in this discussion.
And we spoke about this, I don't know if you remember in the group, we spoke about this and you said very, very clearly, which I agreed with, was that I just look for someone I trust.
Yeah.
So anytime I had medical questions, I come to you, I come to other doctors, people I trust and people I feel like, are not evil.
Yeah.
And then whatever they say, I go with that. I'm not expert in that field.
Exactly.
And that's how it should be.
That's how it should be. Exactly.
Just in kind of last few things, because we're going on for quite a long time. Last few things. Do you believe there's a plan to depopulate the Earth?
Do I believe there's a plan to depopulate the Earth?
That's run by Bill Gates and Melinda.
No.
Why not?
Because
so you believe the narrative that Bill Gates is just kind of good-hearted guy who wants to just...
I'm not saying he's an angel. I'm not saying he's an angel by any means. He's at the end of the day, he's a billionaire, and in a world where there's people starving, it's very hard to justify.
To be fair, he's quite like...
He's quite generous with money.
To be fair.
He does, some
good work.
Good work. And so I'm not going to paint him as a saint, but again, this is a very bold claim, and it requires evidence.
Yeah.
And what do we see? We see the population of the Earth rising.
Yeah.
Within our lifetimes, it went from just over 7 billion to nearly 8 billion people might have crossed that threshold since the last time I checked.
Yeah.
We're not talking a small number. A billion is a huge
number.
Of
course.
So what is the evidence that we're trying to depopulate the Earth? And certainly this virus isn't the answer, because, let's just say tomorrow we halve the population. So we're now down to 3.5 billion.
Yeah.
All it takes is everyone to make 2 kids each. And then we're back to the same spot. It's not sustainable. Like, that depopulation theory is not sustainable in the grand scheme of things. Now, there may be things that do reduce the human population.
Yeah.
Global warming, for example, will displace
and kill.
Absolutely. This pandemic will kill. There will be things and factors that kill humans, as there have always been. But that doesn't mean that there's a plot. There's multiple factors.
There's not a plot, but no, by the way, I'm just being proxy. I'm totally being a proxy, by the way. Like, you know where I stand on these issues. So October they had a pandemic. Do you see that simulation?
Yeah. And so if you're saying that's evidence for this pandemic being staged or whatever, a pandemic has happened multiple times throughout human history. Exactly. It's not a difficult thing to predict.
Exactly.
In the same way, I'm going to make a prediction now, guys, and this is how I'll prove I'm a government shill. Eventually, a comet will hit the Earth, and it may cause substantial damage. Okay. That's all I need to say.
Yeah.
And eventually, it will happen because the Earth has been impacted by comets. It's a rare occurrence. Yeah. But it happens. Yeah. And the same way pandemic happens. And actually, if you're going to
use... But it was so soon.
Yeah, if you... I mean, it was run quite often, and pandemic preparedness is something that we've covered in both of my degrees, actually.
Okay. Both of them, yeah?
Both of them.
Both degrees, yes.
No, come on. No, but
not just one, guys. Not just one. Two.
But it's something that we have covered. And if you're going to use that as evidence, well... The UK didn't follow its...
To be honest,
he didn't do the thing that he was supposed to do.
UK was dead.
So, and that's where it comes down to, is that preparedness would have helped us, but even though we simulated it, we didn't do the things that we were supposed to do.
Exactly.
So, it becomes again hard to justify that. Okay, you'll plan this whole thing out in response, and then you won't follow it.
Yeah.
You can't...
can't have both ways.
Yeah, it can't have both ways. It's either that they planned out a simulation where everyone dies, or they planned out and they messed up.
And last but not least, should we trust vaccines?
Should we trust vaccines? Okay. Again, this is quite a long-winded... you guys are probably sensing a pattern here. I don't have a straight answer for anything. I'm like
when you're on the government payroll.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a politician, so this is what happens. So I think, okay, let's break down a couple of the common conspiracies around. Let's just start off with easily the history of
vaccines.
Yeah. It was founded, it was accidentally almost discovered by
Wasn't to do that. It was to smallpox. Yeah.
smallpox. Yeah. So what happened was
Was it Lister?
Edward Jenner
Edward
in
Jenner.
1796. And the reason I know that is because I wrote a note in my phone and I just glanced at it.
No, because I remember. See, that was primary school stuff. We learned this in primary school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what happened was he injected a child with cowpox.
Yeah.
And
He found the cowpox.
That it protected that child against smallpox, and they refined this idea. And so the way that the vaccines work is that they introduce usually a portion of the virus or causative agent to the body.
Okay.
The body then responds as if the virus is there.
Yeah.
And part of the body's response is that it remembers what that virus looks like. Just in case it comes back again, it's ready.
Yeah.
It can hammer it.
Okay.
Yeah. And so that's what vaccines do. They hijack.
Sounds like a traumatized ex.
Huh? Yeah.
Like the same kind of characteristics turn up again. Like, no.
Yeah. And that's exactly what he does. And so he uses a natural process to immunize you.
Yeah.
So to provide you with some sort of protective measures against a virus, a disease, a contagion, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So that's the basics of a vaccine. There's a multitude of types of vaccines. Okay. So one is that it's the entirety of the microorganism that causes it. It's just been neutralized. Okay. So it's still there. It's live. It's, it just doesn't cause the disease.
Okay.
We inject that in. Those usually produce the best results. It may not be suitable for everyone because, for example, if you're on chemotherapy or unwell in general, it wouldn't be appropriate to give you a live vaccine because you won't have the resources to deal with it anyway. Then there's a different type of vaccine where we just take a portion of the vaccine. We'll take a portion of the virus and inject that. Now, these are usually less good at creating that immunity. And so you can break that down even further into like specific proteins and even DNA and mRNA, which is the genes essentially of a virus. And so all of these different targets, and they have pros and cons to each. So that's the general idea of vaccines, and coronavirus will fit in somewhere in a second. Anti-vaxxers usually use the same few arguments. So number one, there's poisons in vaccines. Everything, if you have it in a large enough quantity, is a poison. Even water is a poison. So quantity, being specific about quantity is very important. So commonly they'll give an example of mercury or aluminium. Now the aluminium dosage is like I want to say 0.0125 or something ridiculously small. You consume 30 to 40, I want to say milligrams or micrograms of aluminum in your day anyway. 0.0 something or 0.1 something is not going to do anything to you. Mercury, even though what it wasn't mercury itself, it was this compound that had a bit of mercury in it, was largely removed in 2000 because of anti-vaxxers. So they found something different, and they produced that. Also, vaccines are way more regulated than any food substance that we eat.
Wow. You
telling me doner meat has the same level of regulation as vaccines? No. The vaccines are tested. You put stuff in your body that is absolutely out there. Anyway, trash. Another one they say as well is that, why is everyone, if you lot all got vaccinated, why are you scared that we're not vaccinating our kids? So again, this falls into now something that's fallen into sort of our vocabulary, herd immunity. So we need a certain number of people to be immune to
so viruses that have vectors.
So exactly that. So if if this room was filled with 10 people and 9 people were vaccinated, that 10th person is protected because 9 people are now immune to it. You'll never get in contact with someone else, who has a virus, because in between you and them is 80,
so the virus can't jump to person to person.
Exactly that. And that's what is herd immunity. And so that's when people use that term, it was adopted from vaccinations. There's no basis of herd immunity in the natural transmission of viruses. That's something that was attributable now. It was always used in the context of vaccines. So that's where the contention partly lies with the herd immunity strategies. So this now becomes a moral question. If you're capable of doing something, and I think the majority of people would accept this, if you're capable of doing something without compromising in equal measure your well-being or the well-being of others, and you choose not to do it, that thing is immoral. And so what I mean by that is, let's just say I see a child drowning and I am capable of saving that child. I stand here and I say to you, do you know what? I don't want to catch a cold and that child dies.
Yeah.
I have a right to do that, do I not? I'm not
course.
obliged to
Yeah.
save that child, but majority of people would accept that as an immoral thing.
Yes.
If I said, okay, the currents are crazy,
Yeah.
and if I go in there, I might die myself, then you might say
Justified.
Justified.
Yeah.
So if you're going to make the argument that I'm not going to vaccinate myself or my children based on this, then you got to bring a justifiable piece of evidence for it. You can't just use speculation.
Like it causes autism.
Which has been debunked loads of times. Another famous one that it causes allergies. It's actually been found to be protective against allergies. So, you need to come with something substantial if you're going to make the argument, which they don't do.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing is that vaccines are so good that we don't even know what the diseases that they protect against look like.
Wow.
And how bad those diseases are.
No, I mean, the thing is, my thing with vaccines is that I've someone who's come from Gambia.
Yeah.
And I've seen how they've practically eradicated malaria.
Exactly.
Through vaccinations.
Yeah.
I can't deny that malaria was a thing where you'd find in many West African households that at least 2-3, like infant mortality, would die.
There's a statistic that, I read a while back. I don't know how they calculated, but it's estimated that 50% of all humans to have ever existed probably died of malaria.
Yeah. You see, this is what I'm trying to say. So for me, vaccination has proven to work.
And
proven to work.
This disease, we've mentioned it earlier.
I've never seen that before,
You've never seen this before.
So you showed me a picture of a child with smallpox. It's dreadful.
Yeah. Can you imagine how horrible it must be to this? It had roughly a 3% fatality rate. Oh no, not 30%, sorry.
Wow.
I'm pretty sure it was much higher. 30% fatality rate.
Is that what it looked like?
That's what it looked like.
I've never seen smallpox,
Yeah, it's a horrible disease, but we never experienced it. Because in the 1950s, we developed a very aggressive vaccination program that led to, by the 1980s, I believe it was,
almost eradication.
Eradicated from the earth.
Wow.
Smallpox exists in certain labs for testing purposes only.
Wow.
It's not native in the wild. Measles, for example, another commonly vaccinated against childhood vaccinated. Yeah, exactly. Measles is attributable to 140,000 deaths every year.
Wow.
Very contagious, very nasty disease. It's estimated that it would have, if between the period of 2000 and 2016, WHO estimates that there would have been 20.4 million deaths in that same period. So we're not talking even comparable numbers anymore. We're talking a huge increase. If we're talking polio, another commonly vaccinated. Now, polio numbers were, not as dramatic as in the millions. They were about 7,000 or 8,000 polio cases. But polio causes usually temporary or permanent paralysis.
Yeah. My uncle had polio.
Yeah, life-threatening. And,
and he passed away. You're quite young as well.
Exactly. And so it's a nasty disease.
Yeah.
Which child would you say deserves to die like that because you don't want to vaccinate your child? It could be your child. It could be your child. But polio, again, 1950s, I believe it was. UK developed a very good vaccination program. The UK hasn't had a natural polio case since years ago. I don't know. Years ago. Look it up, guys. You guys have Google. So we see that vaccines, and just because we've forgotten how nasty the diseases are, doesn't mean that vaccines are somehow bad.
Yeah.
You just forgotten how nasty this disease are. And if you're saying that one in, I think the statistic is like 1 in 100 million or maybe 1 in 10 million people die as a reaction to a vaccine, you're more likely to die of a lightning strike than you are to die of, like, say, MMR vaccinations.
And I feel like you make a very good point. I feel like because we're so advanced in sense medically, we haven't seen these things.
Yeah,
we haven't seen smallpox. I haven't seen smallpox ever in my life. I haven't seen how these diseases look. Obviously, I've had personal experience with polio with my uncle.
Yeah.
But when you see, again, given in the Gambian context, West Africa, when you see how, like, my grandma will tell you from her day how it's very common. You have like again, infant mortality was so high because of cholera, because of malaria, all these things, and then now my grandma's still alive. From that time to now, she's seen a decrease. It's almost uncommon now for a child to die.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And
that's an exact effect of vaccines.
And the science and the development of treatments and things like that. I am gonna now just throw a complete spanner in the works.
Okay.
Because it comes to the COVID vaccination. So the COVID vaccination, Generally speaking, to produce a vaccine, it takes 10, 25 years to
Really?
bring it. Takes
So
a
why
long
saying
time.
about they're gonna say they're bringing
That
it
they're
out in a
going to bring
year?
out in years. So this raises now
That's cap.
suddenly an interesting question. And this is where the healthy skepticism comes in. So the COVID vaccines, the reasons why they're saying that it is generally would be considered safer is that it uses a quite a novel approach. And what it does is it doesn't inject any part of the virus. All
Okay.
it injects is a portion of the DNA.
Okay.
The DNA then is expressed within the body. That expresses a protein which is then recognized by the body, and then you get the sort of immune response that we spoke about earlier. There's usually 3 phases in regards to bringing out a vaccine. Phase 1, you test the safety of it. So there's animal testing and human testing to make sure that this doesn't cause any nasty sort of effects. Phase 2 is it's the efficacy phase. So that's how effective is it at treating the disease in question. And then phase 3, you send it out to thousands and thousands of people and test it against, and it's almost continuous. Like we have a yellow card reporting scheme, which any drug, if you have an adverse reaction, we'll report it, or at least we should report it. And so the test never ends at that point. Phase 3 is like this huge test, you publish your data, but the test never really ends. So what is happening with the coronavirus vaccine? So what we've done, what the pharmaceutical companies have done, and there's multiple pharmaceutical companies, not just one, they've kind of tested phase 1, got enough data to prove that it's roughly safe. So it's not as robust of a data as you would see in normal climate. And then moved on to phase 2. Phase 1 still continues at this point. Phase 2, you test the efficacy. Many vaccines probably found that don't do a sufficient response. And then from phase 2 you move on to phase 3 when you get an idea of how well it works. The reason why there's a degree of confidence in this is that there was widespread sharing of data early on. So the genome of the virus was shared in January.
It's got really early on, isn't it?
And that was shared in January. So people had time to look at it, find out exactly what they are aiming for, isolate that. In Canada, I believe it was Canadian scientists that finally managed to absolutely isolate the virus and do all of these things. And it's based on an approach that in a theory is safe. It still goes through all 3 phases, so we're not skipping a step in testing for this. I use the term "we" not because I'm a representative of any of these companies. Genuinely, I couldn't.
He's got shares in the COVID
vaccine. AstraZeneca, Oxford Studies, the one I'm back. I don't have any shares. I don't really care about the bottom line of any pharmaceutical company. I say we because I do believe that we are in this together as humans, and so I'm not trying to say we in representation of any particular group. In humanity's cause is what I'm referring to as we. But we are still going to go through all 3 phases. I think there's things that we can improve. Number 1, transparency. So as we've seen recently, the AstraZeneca Oxford study was actually put on hold. And
I heard about that. It was like literally they said they're doing so well.
Suddenly one person reacted, developed a neurological condition. I think that they described it as an unexplained neurological condition.
Wow.
But they were diagnosed with the condition. They were diagnosed with transverse myelitis, I believe it was. And we would like to see what information they hold about that. They won't publish it because all of these things affect their stock. Every good media report and every promising report that you read about the Oxford vaccine probably did increase their stock quite a bit. And, this would be damaging to the stock, but they won't report it for that reasons. And so we should be skeptical about those sort of aspects of it. However, they will hopefully eventually publish all their data and then we can review it and then we can come to a better judgment. So I do think that the things can be done better. But that doesn't discredit vaccines as a whole. 100%. And it hasn't written off the COVID vaccine. Even if we're talking in a study of 10,000 people, if 1,000 person did develop...
1,000?
10,000.
Out of 10,000?
Yeah, if one person out of 10,000 develop a condition, we need to first work out, is this as a direct result of the vaccine? And, as many drugs do contain side effects, is that risk worth it essentially in the treatment of this? And so all of these things do come into play, and these are questions that we need to ask of these pharmaceutical companies and of ourselves, and how we categorize this. And so there needs to be a lot more before we get to a vaccine, and that's part of the reason why we manage expectations.
Last 2 things then. Do you think that they scrapped it now, but Australia was talking about making vaccines mandatory? Do you think vaccines should be mandatory?
No, is the
Short
answer.
answer.
Is the short answer. I don't think any treatment should be mandatory. If we're looking for solutions to these problems, we don't, and I don't even believe that there's a like kind of what we've done today, where we've spoke about a theory or a
Yeah.
thing and then spoke about the alternative
Yeah.
and debunking it one to one.
Yeah.
These are very complex problems,
Mm-hmm.
and we're not talking about just an individual problem, even though we live in an individualistic society.
Yeah.
These are social problems, political problems. Often we speak about the role of social media and the
Yeah.
news and media as a whole, and in all of these things, and it's a very complex narrative. What I believe in is, well, number one, equipping people with the ability to think critically,
Yeah.
with scientific literacy,
Yes.
to be able to reason with the world around them, give
Yes.
them some agency, to be able to give them the right tools to be able to interpret the world around them in a way that we share this reality, and not this sort of primitive sort of approach
Yes.
where we kind of take shortcuts and develop our own hypothesis. Second thing is that we do kind of need regulation. We're seeing the role of social media in all of this, and
Yeah.
they're slowly trying to step up the game. YouTube now has that Wikipedia
Yeah, I've seen that.
link at the
Yeah.
bottom, and they demonetize videos that are promote conspiracy theories, and Facebook is now even, well, I think Twitter fact checked the President Trump.
I actually got a tweet of his removed.
Yeah, exactly. And so like we are seeing this role, but social media was programmed in a way that it provides you with an intense emotion, and then it feeds into that emotion,
Yeah.
and then promotes the same things and makes you see the things that you want to see. And so there's a role in this, and these are other questions that we need to ask. So the solution isn't just a case of no. The solution isn't just a case of you're wrong, you have to do this.
Okay.
The solution is
Better
that
education.
we as humanity
Yeah.
need to come to the same page and be on a sort of a level playing field where we can move on this journey together. I appreciate you said like half an hour ago that we've been going on for too long.
No.
But
I'm loving this, man. I'm
continue.
loving this, man.
There's a quote by Carl Sagan. Genuinely, I encourage everyone to look up this quote, because it's quite poetic and a great call to action, and it's in reference to a photo taken by, I want to say, Voyager 1, which is a satellite we spent far out into space. It's reached outside of our solar system even.
Wow.
So it's huge. And what it did was, on, I want to say it was Earth Day or some significant day, they turned it around and made it take a photo of Earth from far away.
Yeah.
And the image itself, it's called the pale blue dot, and that's where you'll find, if you type in that in Google, you'll find Carl Sagan's reflections on it, and all it shows is a dot, a pixel. It's a single blue pixel.
Wow.
And the way that Carl Sagan describes it is the pale blue dot is a mote of dust suspended on a sunbeam. And that's all it is. That is everything that you've ever known.
Yep.
Everything that has ever existed.
To
and
you, yep.
That is the only home that we have for the time being. And so it's up to us. Obviously, he said it a lot more poetically than I'm saying now. But at the end, he reflects on it, that he goes, that this is everything that we know.
Yeah.
And we have a responsibility to be kinder to each other and look after the only place that we've ever known as home. And I think that's...
And on that beautiful note,
Yeah.
I'll end it there.
Yeah.
Thank you so much,
You're
bro.
welcome.
Take care.
Take care.